G'day guys, I'm Patrick Naude from CMYK Industries. I'll be available as a consultant should you want to know anything more about the information in this video, and my contact details will be shown at the end. Thank you for taking time to listen to me. Right guys, so the economy of the country South Africa and the GDP is quite an interesting one. The GDP of South Africa is worth about 360 billion US dollars. However, the value of this only represents 0.59% of the world economy. So in other words, South Africa is not even worth 1% of the global economy. However, it's still 360 odd billion US dollars. So there is an industry out there. The population in South Africa is about 56 to 57 million people. And South Africa has the second largest economy in Africa, other than Nigeria. It is also one of the most industrialized countries in Africa. Tax and importing policies in the local market of South Africa. Currently, VAT is posed at 15%, and there are no duties on toner cartridges or supplies for imports. Other markets like textiles, they carry a 20 to 50% duty on imports. So there is opportunity, and you can see why the Chinese product is growing so much versus the local remanufactured product. The current state of the printing supplies industry in South Africa, I like to break this up into two segments. If you have a look at it, you go end user, small business, and home user is the one segment. And then I like to take office automation, or I call them MPS dealers. The industry for the end user stroke small business or home user is on a decline from the aspect where the shop refillers environment, they tend to have stopped refilling most of their cartridges. A lot of the dealers have already closed down their production, and they started importing compatible products from the Chinese manufacturers and local distributors that import these products. Various reasons for that is possibly because the price structure of the product coming in from China is actually more competitive versus taking a local product remanufactured, adding labor costs, etc. So the Chinese product is reliable and cost effective for the market. Smaller businesses, however, they look at that and they think, well, I can make more money buying a product as opposed to having more overhead and more staff. So they tend to have reduced their factories and staff intake. Office automation to me is always going to be strong. The reason for this, and one of the main factors, is these companies tend to deal with the higher end corporates. The office automation companies tend to tie up their customers into a 60-month contract. They thus own that customer for 60 months. And they tend to include the toners and the service in their agreements. So you will then decide you need 10 machines in your fleet, and you might be a bank, and you will then take that out on a rental for 5 years or 60 months, and then your service provider will give you free support, free maintenance, etc. So that is part two, or the second segment of the industry that is thriving. I also notice now that the OEMs are becoming very, very more aware of our aftermarket industry, and they started making it more difficult for the office automation guys to release products. So you'll notice on chip technology, for instance, it's much stronger, and there's hundreds and hundreds of firmware upgrades annually. And also the toner cartridges all seem to be coming out chip now, whereas in the past, it might have just been a plastic bottle that you'd refill and you can send it out then. So based on what I can see as the local trend of these two segments, office automation is the most stable at present. The market share of the different office equipment brands. This is always a tricky one, as for many years, Ricoh or Ryco, as we know it, Konica Minolta and Canon are generally your top sellers globally. But recently, the HP Samsung buy has really upset the market here in South Africa. The reason it becomes tricky is that the Samsung dealers never used to like the HP product based on the running cost of the machinery. So it's not a fact the machines are inadequate. It's purely running costs when it comes to office automation. They also now have to buy from the channel, meaning the Samsung dealers have to buy Samsung/HP products from the channel, whereas before they used to buy direct. Okay, now nobody likes to get told where to buy from. So the word on the ground now is that the previous distributors of Samsung have now become the HP distributors. So picture this: if your company was totally committed to a certain brand, then all of a sudden you get told by those importers, hey, you need to buy a product that you never used to like. You're not going to like to do that. So this is the reason why the chaps don't like to deal with who they're told to. Recently, a few months after that, it was also told that this one Samsung 8 is now the top HP reseller. So what do you do if this is your business? Naturally, you say, I'm not going to support them. They're my opposition. I'm going to find another brand. The ones that are out there and available and needed some market share were Oki and Toshiba. With all the uncertainty around, all these dealers seem to have moved across to Oki data, and it was possibly because they found the running cost to be quite effective. And however, the office automation is a highly service-driven industry, and they base everything on reliability, support, and backup, and spares, and things like that. So lately, I've noticed that the guys who gave Occudata an opportunity then seem to decide, well, something's not right because we're not getting the right service levels from this company or this OEM. And they now tend to be looking for other office automation brands to try out. Recently, there was an upper management change within Occudata, and this also seemed to have settled things down, and the stock levels have come right. However, during that time frame, the office automation dealers cannot decide, I'm going with a product, have uncertainty, and let their customers down. So they've now started shopping again, if that makes sense. So in order to have a reliable supply, you need to have that backup for your dealer. So that's very important to the dealer. It's important that the guys wanting to enter the country have good, reliable backup service and supplies. During the same period, Canon seemed to be very silent on the matter, and they became a lot more aggressive, and they started picking up and scooping a lot more dealers, whereas in the past, they only had certain dealers they would approach or allow product to. All these changes in the South African market has only now realized that the office automation guys have become multi-branded. So now they're no longer just Canon or just Samsung or just HP. They've now decided to do what we call multi-branded, and they're choosing the best machine in that segment. So for a company that does many suppliers and many parts as an aftermarket supplier, it's a lot easier for you now to offer Canon, Lexmark, Kyocera, Konica Minolta to one dealer because they might have all those machines within their fleet. Phantom on the other end. Phantom, to me, let's say they've become a true OEM. The machine looks great. It's entry level. The pricing is right. However, where they've got clever is the toner cartridge is very expensive. The Phantom market share in South Africa is more guided towards the smaller home office, one-man business that needs one printer and that type of thing, and he buys the cheap entry-level printer, no longer an inkjet. But then when it comes to buying a toner cartridge, that's when he says, it's too expensive for me. But the strategy is right. High-end color production, in my opinion, Xerox still owns that space. Resellers of Sharp in South Africa have also had some restructuring, and they've, however, managed to secure, we call it an RT3 government contract, which has started phasing in recently. This is a 3-year contract where the distributors of all the brands get to go to the government. There's some kind of a council, if you want to call it that, and they go to tender for every segment in the market, from the smallest machine to the highest end production machine. And each brand gets to say, this is my offering for the 3-year period, and these are my running costs. And Sharp has been awarded a few of the segments in that, and good for them. You'll notice, however, I haven't commented on the stalwarts like Ricoh, Canon, and Konica Minolta. And this to me is they just get it right. You never really find a dealer, Ricoh, Minolta, or Canon, that's moaning about supply or backup service or things like that. So whatever they've done from a higher level or importing into South Africa, they seem to have got it right. So I think the rest of the guys need to take a step back and have a look and think if they want their OEM brands to have success in the market in South Africa, they need to look at what these opposing companies who are thriving, what they are doing. David, it's an interesting question where you ask about the device types, meaning A4, A3, multifunction, wide format, etc. So the last presentation I saw, it showed the A4 mono multifunction range. Kyocera seemed to be one of the top performers, along with Samsung. Samsung did have a very, very big base here, and Kyocera is always the underdog or the dark horse that you don't really hear too much about, but they're out there because there's many multi-branded dealers that have gone with that entry-level segment of machinery. The top A3 machines in color seem to have been Konica Minolta and Samsung. Kyocera also had a small piece of the pie. However, the reason I find that Samsung seemed to stick out is because of the HP Samsung buyout. HP didn't play in the space very much because they didn't have a machine that could run cost effectively enough. And that was one of the many reasons why they did the sale with Samsung, other than the many patents that came along with that. The aftermarket industry versus finished product and components. Well, this is very, very interesting. In the past, the component industry and suppliers was an 80% versus 20%. Now, by that, I mean 80% of the business we had here was supplying supplies to the remanufacturers or refillers versus a 20% imported product. However, now that's changed dramatically, and only the bigger dealers seem to have stayed, and one or two of the reasons are they have very good, strong collection programs for empties. A lot of the time we find, hey, why are you not refilling or recycling? And the answers we always get is we cannot get enough empties because the empties brokers seem to be exporting them as they're receiving a higher rate with the rand versus the dollar exchange. Recent statistics have shown that our trend in South Africa has shifted to a 60-40, meaning 40% of supplies, where it used to be 80%, and now 60% of finished cartridges or compatible cartridges. I definitely think this will continue to decline as our labor is becoming very costly and empties are harder to come by. The type of products that are out here or being remanufactured versus rebuilt, products that are imported are still from the smallest, let's call it the HP 12A, for instance, and then up to the 390X, the HP 390X or 281X. Generally, these are all new builds. They all have 100% new componentry. However, the remanufactured products are normally your high-end color products, and the more difficult jumbo, or I call them the briefcase, the HP 9000 type cartridges, those ones you're not going to get a generic or a compatible or a new build for. It's easier and better and more stable to go with a recycled product. I think our trend locally is very similar to the global trend, although we may be a year or two behind the rest of the world. How many aftermarket companies did we have in South Africa? Well, at one stage, we were sitting with over 300 guys who were refilling or recycling. I doubt if there's even 80 of them left that are refilling. And it's quite sad because you can imagine 300 businesses had 5 to 10 to 20 staff within them. And now that number's like a third of the percentage. You've got so many people that have lost their jobs. And I think this is going to continue to grow. For me, I would love there still to be a stronger, better remanufactured product or market out there, as we could empower people, give them a trade, give them jobs, create skills, and they could then feed their families. There'll be less poverty and theft too. Distributors in South Africa are actually looking for reliability, strong companies to deal with, and they're definitely looking at high quality products. There are a few distributors out there already importing. Price is a small percentage of the factor, because as a distributor, you know, hey, I've got a big buying power. I know I'm going to get my price. I need to make sure I pick the right vendor or the right supply chain. So it's not really wanting the best price up front. It's really knowing I need to buy from the right guy who gives me the right warranty and the good backup service and support. The local market, generally the local market, or aftermarket as I know it, is dying from a refill aspect. I think I mentioned that earlier. There's becoming less refillers in the country, and those guys are buying from the distributors. Okay. However, in the office automation industry, the talk of the town is that the Samsung dealers are all searching for another brand to sell within their office automation base, because a lot of them have, for the last 7, 8, 10 years, been selling Samsung. And when those machines start coming up for renewal by year 4, by year 5, you cannot buy a Samsung printer anymore. You need to find and replace it with something else. So naturally, as a businessman, you are hurrying to find the right partner to bring a product to your end user. Another great question you posed to me is, what new products are the aftermarket players looking for? So for instance, I know for a fact that the aftermarket is craving top quality fuser parts, spares, OPC rebuild kits or drum kits, developers, and even toner cartridges that are patent safe and patent friendly. These are in high demand. Let's touch quickly on the patents or to be IP safe. Although it's not imposed or very strict in Africa, however, the OEMs that are starting to buy, they tend to respect that rule and that law. So let's not get it wrong if we start getting the goods here. Let's respect the OEM and do the right thing when it comes to office automation supplies. Right, we're in part 4, David. The question is, any other information you think the imaging supplies industry would be interested to know about South Africa? Okay. David, interesting question you ask, where you relate to me that, is there anything that suppliers in the industry would like to know about South Africa? South Africa is quite a large country, okay, with 3 major centers. So picture this. You have Johannesburg in the central, and you have Durban and Cape Town. Most of the money is spent in Johannesburg, or Gauteng, as we pronounce it. And I would say it covers 70% of the purchases of the entire country. Durban and Cape Town are your ports, and they're a close second to each other. So the hardest thing about being effective in South Africa is the time it takes to deliver goods cost effectively to your customer. So a customer, for instance, in Cape Town doesn't want to wait 2 days for his order when he can get it delivered locally from a Cape Town supplier. And that is why it's very important that when you're setting up, you set up your company to have distribution in the various regions. So in other words, if you want to be a market leader here, you have to invest in someone who can teach you all this. You need to set up in all 3 major centers so that you can never make your customer wait for his goods. Customers are not holding as much inventory as they used to. They're forcing you, the importer or the supplier, to hold the stock. Another interesting thing is, from Gauteng, which is your main hub where there's 70% of the purchases that come from, there's many head offices there. You can then enter into Africa in countries like Namibia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola, Zambia. That's just to name a few surrounding countries. These countries are still a few years behind us and not really on the latest models. However, they're still more of a recycling market where they're trying to churn out and fix as many of their old machines as possible. So those African countries are definitely more active in producing numbers, but not in producing rand value or dollar value, if that makes sense. So they might be doing a few thousand lasers, but it's all low margin stuff. Hey guys, I'm proud to be an RT Media consultant, and I'm extremely happy to help you grow your market share here in South Africa as a consultant, as I have over 20 years experience in my local industry, from an aftermarket sales, stroke product knowledge, and also distribution. As we know, distribution is key to get your product to all the places in Africa. Also, as a neighboring country, should you be wanting to find the right supplier, I'm happy to help you get those people on board to get your brand to the next level at the right price and service. Patrick here, I'm willing to make your business a success. Thank you, and kindly contact me after this. There'll be a clip with all my contact details.